So Ashley, welcome to OnPolitics. Refresh our memories on this story. The Department of Justice has been doing this review of the police department. What's the history there? How did that get started, and what does the draft report that you got your hands on show?
So the history of this whole review begins with Milwaukee Police Chief Edward Flynn requesting the federal government review the department, all aspects of it, in what's known as a collaborative reform initiative. He made this request in November 2015. He made it on the same day that federal prosecutors decided not to charge the now fired officer who shot and killed Dontre Hamilton in Red Arrow Park.
This came in the wake of the Dontre Hamilton shooting.
It did, indeed.
Yeah.
And at the time, Chief Flynn said, I understand there are many in the community who still won't accept my assertions or my perspective that this is a top-notch professional police department, and so let's have the federal government come in and take a thorough review and see what they say.
Okay, so you got your hands on a draft report that sounds like it was written sometime last year.
Yes.
And the police department, while they didn't speak with you directly, issued a statement that essentially said, well, we've been doing some other stuff in the meantime. So walk me through what the report sort of in summary says and what they say they've been doing to address that.
Sure, and I'll just take one step back. So in all of this time, there hasn't really been any indication from the Federal Department of Justice as to when a final report would be released. They originally estimated what they call an initial assessment would be out in January, so that was 8 months ago.
Right.
That has led to calls from some aldermen and also many community members for at least the drafts to be released, because then there would at least be something, some results, some information out there. Now, from the police department's perspective, that is, you know, they don't agree with that because this is a collaborative process. So it appears that the draft is possibly the initial draft. We're not entirely sure. And the department would have responded to those particular concerns, and they did make very clear, the department did, that they believe this draft has inaccuracies in terms of the content as well. Some of that content includes assessments on community policing, traffic stops, internal affairs and discipline, how officers accused of misconduct are identified, and how those types of investigations are undertaken within the department. I think one of the key concerns is about the possible, at least from this draft report, something federal authorities identified was possibly an over-reliance on data within the department, possibly coming at the expense of community relations. Not saying that the use of data is wrong, just saying that it may be having unintended consequences.
Right, and they're saying that even beat cops sometimes can't identify or can't define what it means to do community policing. So there appears to be a lack of at least acknowledgement that that's what the chief wants.
And in many cases, this is something, well, first of all, this is something Chief Flynn has maintained throughout. There have been community conversations and outside speakers brought into the city to discuss community policing and problem-orienting policing. The chief has always maintained the department does do that. According to some of these interviews with officers, at least contained in the draft report, their understanding is that that type of policing is done only by certain members of the department, and that it's not necessarily, in their view, a holistic department-wide policy. I'm sure the chief would disagree with that, but that is what was contained within the draft report.
Talk about traffic stops, because that's a particular focus here in this draft report, at least. What's it say about how MPD is handling stops?
So the traffic stop issue comes up, and it appears to show, you know, racial disparities within the traffic stops made by the department. Again, this is something that's come up throughout the years. It's been a common criticism or concern that people have with MPD strategy. The chief has always said, you know, officers are going where there are crime hotspots. They're going where crime is occurring. So sometimes those areas tend to be overlaid with poverty, historic segregation, other social problems. So, and he points out there are very huge disparities and victimization within the city as well. So that's how he's explained that before. I think there's still a concern, though, that, and if you read the draft report, there's a concern that who is being stopped, for what reason, how are residents internalizing that interaction with officers. And sometimes it's good, but sometimes people feel like they're being hassled.
Yeah, and it certainly has an effect on how the community feels about how the police are doing their jobs. One final question. This is a draft report.
Yes.
When are we going to see a final report? Are we ever going to see a final report?
Those are really good questions. We don't know. The Justice Department is currently reviewing all aspects of what it does, including this collaborative reform process. We've asked the Justice Department about the status of the report, and all we've been told is that that review of everything, including collaborative reform, is ongoing. The report, according to the Justice Department, is not done. Presumably there's an updated version that may be available at some point, but it's unclear when or if ever it would be released to the public.